The metal groaned, and he was too heavy. The flimsy particle board leg of her cot snapped, dumping the unconscious Alpha onto the grimy floorboards of her tiny third-floor apartment. Ilara didn't scream. She just stared, frozen, as the man, a mountain of muscle, blood, and rainwater, hit the floor with a sound that shook the plaster from the ceiling below. He was dying. She'd found him in the alley behind the diner, surrounded by 3 rogues who scattered the moment she'd screamed and thrown a brick. Now he was here, bleeding out on her floor, and she was an idiot, a terrified, starving idiot who had just brought the entire shifter world crashing into the human anonymity she had bled to build. His breath hitched, a wet, agonizing sound. She grabbed the threadbare towel she'd been using, pressing it against the gaping wound in his side, ignoring the jolt of raw, unfiltered alpha power that sizzled against her skin. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just stay." His hand shot out, clamping around her wrist with impossible strength. Her breath caught in her throat. His eyes, a burning, predatory gold, snapped open. He wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at her arm. "No," she breathed, a cold, sharp dread slicing through her. The thick, waterproof concealer she applied every morning, the barrier between her and that world, was failing. The steam from the boiling water, the sweat of her panic, the sheer proximity of his power, it was dissolving. And beneath his grip, where his skin met hers, a faint, lunar silver light pulsed, pushing against the beige makeup. He saw it. The glow. The one thing she had sworn to keep hidden. The mark of her ultimate shame. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. "What are you?" he rasped, the words a command, not a question. His voice was gravel and authority, and it vibrated straight to her bones, making the wolf she kept, starved and silent, whimper in submission. Ilara tried to yank her arm free, but his grip was iron. "Nothing," she lied, her voice thin. "Inhuman. Let go." He ignored her, his gaze locked on the silver light that was now undeniably pushing through the makeup, tracing the crescent moon and starburst pattern etched into her skin. It was a brand, a curse. "You lie," he growled. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips, but his eyes never lost their focus. "You smell wrong. Not human, not pack. But you." He winced, his entire body tensing in agony as the silver-poisoned blade in his gut did its work. "You bear the mark." Her blood ran cold. He knew what it was. Not just a shifter mark, but the mark. The one whispered about in dread. The mark of the cast-off, the rejected. The one the moon goddess herself had branded as unworthy of a fated mate. "Please," she begged, the fight draining out of her, replaced by the old, familiar terror. "They'll find me. If you know what it is, you know what they'll do." "Who?" he demanded. "Everyone." The Alpha stared at her, his golden eyes searching her face. He saw the genuine fear, the cheap, rain-soaked jacket, the hollows under her cheeks. He saw the poverty and the desperation. And he saw the glowing silver mark of a Luna on the wrist of a woman living in a slum. The contradiction was so stark it seemed to make him forget his pain. "I am Kalen," he grunted, forcing himself up on one elbow, his muscles screaming in protest. "Alpha of the Stonecrest Pack. And you, You saved me. I shouldn't have, she whispered, tears burning her eyes. I should have left you in the alley. Yes, you should have, he agreed, his voice rough. My enemies are not allies of whatever you are. They'll kill you for just being in the same room as me. He looked around the tiny, peeling paint room, at the single bulb hanging from the ceiling, the empty ramen cups on the counter. You have nothing. Why? Because you were dying, she said, the answer raw and honest, and I know what that feels like. Kaylin held her gaze. The power rolling off him was immense, a physical weight in the small room, yet he was entirely at her mercy. He needed a healer. He needed his pack. He was in rival territory, wounded, and his only ally was a branded outcast who was terrified of her own shadow. They used silver, he said, his voice tightening as another wave of pain hit him. I can't shift. I can't heal. I know, she said, her hands automatically going back to the wound, pressing down. I have some herbs from my grandmother. They might slow it, but I can't. Get me to the iron door. It's a neutral zone, 2 miles south on the river. 2 miles? She choked. You can't even stand, and I can't go there. That's their territory. Whose? Xander's. The name dropped into the room like a stone. Kaylin's eyes widened, recognition and a new cold anger dawning. Alpha Xander, of the Black Moon Pack? It was his rogues who attacked me. I smelled his stench on them. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Xander's rogues? Here? He's making a territory play, Kaylin grunted, pushing himself into a sitting position against the wall, his face pale and slick with sweat. And I walked right into it. He looked at her again, his gaze sharp, analytical. Xander, that's who you're hiding from, isn't it? That's whose name makes a Luna-marked wolf live in a human slum. She couldn't speak. She just nodded, the shame burning hot in her chest. He was my fated mate, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. He rejected me, in front of the entire Pack Council. Said I was a weak-blooded Omega, unfit to be his Luna. He cast me out. And the mark? Kaylin asked, his voice quiet, intense. It appeared that night, she said, her voice breaking. The moment the mate bond shattered, the goddess branded me as rejected, a warning to all other packs. Am unclean. Kaylin stared at her, and for the first time, the predatory gold in his eyes softened, replaced by something she couldn't name. It wasn't pity. It was understanding. He's a fool, Kaylin said, his voice a low rumble. That is not a mark of rejection, outcast. That is the mark of a chosen Luna, one whose fated bond was broken by an unworthy alpha. The goddess didn't brand you as a curse. She marked you as hers. Ilara stared at her, her heart hammering. What does that mean? It means, Kaylin said, his hand tightening on her wrist again, but this time it wasn't a capture, it was an anchor. That you are the only one who can get me out of this city alive. Xander's men are hunting me, but he's hunting you too. If he finds you with me, he'll kill us both. He released her wrist, leaving a tingling heat behind. He pulled a heavy, waterproof pouch from his belt, hissing in pain as the movement tore at his wound. He tossed it onto her lap. It landed with a heavy, metallic clink. Ilara opened it. Inside were stacks of $100 bills, more money than she had seen in her entire life, and a heavy, black credit card. That's $5,000, Kaylin said. Get me to the iron door. Get me to my pack, and I'll give you 10 times that. Enough to disappear. Enough to go somewhere Xander can never find you. The dilemma slammed into her. This was it. The escape she dreamed of. A way out of the hunger, the cold, the constant gnawing fear. All she had to do was walk the most powerful alpha in the region, a man bleeding out from a silver-laced blade, 2 miles through a city controlled by the very man who had destroyed her life. His enemies were her enemies. Her tormentor was his attacker. They were trapped in the same web, woven by the same spider. She looked at the money, then at the blood seeping through the towel at his side. He was watching her, his face a mask of pained endurance. He wasn't begging, he was offering a transaction. "I don't have a car," she said, her voice quiet. "We don't need one," Kalen replied. "They'll be watching the roads. We take the tunnels, the old maintenance lines under the city." I know them," she whispered. "I use them sometimes, when I can't, when I need to hide." Good. Kalen used the wall to haul himself to his feet, swaying dangerously. He was a solid wall of power, 6.5 feet tall, and he dwarfed her tiny apartment. He slung one arm over her shoulders, his weight nearly buckling her knees. The scent of him, pine, ozone, and blood, was overwhelming. "Let's go. Your new life is waiting." Ilara's heart hammered. She wasn't a warrior, she was a survivor. But as she supported the crushing weight of the dying alpha, she realized this was no longer about survival. This was about escape. And for the first time since her rejection, a tiny, cold spark of something other than fear flickered in her chest. It felt like rage. She shoved the money into her backpack, grabbed her grandmother's herbs, and kicked open her apartment door. "This way," she said, leading him into the darkened, rain-lashed hallway. "And try not to bleed on the stairs. My landlord is a nightmare." The journey to the tunnels was a blur of rain-slicked alleys and agonizingly slow progress. Kalen was a dead weight, his strength failing fast. The silver poison was insidious, neutralizing his wolf's healing. He was burning with fever, his breaths coming in ragged, painful gasps. Ilara, fueled by a desperate, terrified adrenaline, was his crutch, his guide, and his only hope. They ducked into a narrow gap between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the stench of stale garbage thick in the air. Kalen stumbled, his full weight crashing against her, pinning her to the wet brick. "Stop," he gasped, sliding down the wall into a sitting position on the wet pavement. "Just a minute." "We can't," Ilara urged, her eyes scanning the street. "They'll find us. Kalen, we have to move." "I'm burning," he breathed, his eyes rolling back. His skin was radiating heat. "The poison, it's in my blood." "I know." Panic seized her. He was dying, right here in this alley. "I have the herbs. We need water." She looked around frantically. A gutter pipe was overflowing with rainwater. It was filthy, but it was all they had. She cupped her hands, catching the gritty stream, and brought it to her backpack. She ripped open the small pouch of dried herbs, yarrow, silverleaf, and moonflower, her grandmother had taught her to use. It wasn't a cure for silver, but it could slow the burning. She crushed the herbs into the water, making a foul-smelling paste. "Kalen," she said, shaking his shoulder, "wake up. You have to take this." He was delirious, muttering about his pack, about betrayal. "Jax! Find Jax!" "There's no Jax," she hissed, grabbing his face. Her small hands were stark against his broad, stubbled jaw. "There's only me. Open your mouth." His gold eyes focused on her, the lucidity fading. He looked at her, then at the gritty paste in her hand. He opened his mouth. Ilara pushed the herbs inside, forcing him to swallow. He choked, his whole body convulsing, but he got it on. He slumped back, his breathing still ragged, but the frantic, burning edge seemed to quiet. "You're a strange creature," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on her. "Marked like a queen, living like a rat." "And you're a dying king," she countered, her voice sharp with fear. "Now get up. The tunnel entrance is 2 blocks from here. Xander, he doesn't know what you are," Kalen continued, his voice thick. "He thinks he broke you. He's a fool." "He did break me," Ilara said, the admission bitter. "He took everything. My pack, my fated bond, my name. I'm a nothing." This mark is just the proof. Kalen's hand found her wrist again, his grip weak but firm. The silver mark glowed faintly in the gloom of the alley, a beacon only he could see. "No," he whispered, his thumb tracing the crescent moon. "He didn't break you. He tempered you. He forced you into the fire. The goddess just showed you the steel." His words hit her, confusing and strange. She had always seen the mark as a brand of failure. He saw it as a weapon. A shout echoed from the end of the alley. "I smell him! This way!" Terror shot through Ilara. "They're here! Kalen, up, now!" The sound of their hunters shocked Kalen's alpha instincts awake. With a roar that was half agony, half rage, he surged to his feet, using her and the wall for support. "Which way?" "This way." She grabbed his hand, pulling him deeper into the alley, toward a rusted grate set into the pavement. "It leads to the storm drains." She dropped to her knees, her fingers fumbling with the rusted lock. It was old, but she knew the trick to it. A sharp pull, a twist to the left. A huge, scarred wolf burst around the corner, skidding to a halt 20 feet away. It was one of Xander's enforcers, not fully shifted, a grotesque, man-like beast. "Well, well," the rogue growled, his voice a guttural mockery. "The great Alpha Kalen, brought low. And what's this? Xander's little pet?" Ilara froze. She knew him. Rorik. He was the one who had held her down as Xander had publicly denounced her. Kalen stepped in front of her, his body a trembling shield. "Get back," he snarled, his own wolf fighting for dominance over the poison. "You're in no position to give orders, Stonecrest," Rorik sneered, taking a step closer. "Xander wants you alive. He wants her dead. I'll be happy to oblige." He lunged. Kalen met him, not with speed, but with sheer, desperate mass. The two collided, a crash of pained roars and tearing flesh. Kalen was weaker, the silver burning him from the inside out, but he was still an alpha. He threw Rorik against the wall, but the rogue was fast, his claws raking across Kalen's chest. Kalen roared in agony. Ilara finally got the grate open. "Kalen, the tunnel!" Rorik saw his chance. Kalen was staggered, and the girl was vulnerable. He ignored Kalen and dove for Ilara. She scrambled back, but she wasn't fast enough. He grabbed her by the ankle, his claws digging into her skin, and dragged her out. "Let her go!" Kalen bellowed. "Xander should have let me finish you," Rorik snarled at Ilara, raising his claws for a killing blow. "No!" The word ripped from Ilara's throat, but it wasn't her voice. It was a sound of pure primal command. A wave of silver energy, cold and bright as the moon, exploded from her. It wasn't physical, but it slammed into Rorik like a freight train. The rogue froze, his claws inches from her face, his eyes wide with shock. The power radiated from the mark on her wrist, which was now blazing like a star. Rorik whimpered. He didn't just feel threatened, he felt judged. His wolf, recognizing a superior primal authority, cringed. Ilara stared at her own arm, at the light pouring from her skin. She had no idea she could do that. Kalen didn't hesitate. Seizing the rogue's moment of paralysis, he grabbed Rorik by the throat and snapped his neck with a wet final crack. The rogue collapsed. The alley was suddenly silent,
broken only by the rain and their ragged breathing. Kalen stared at Alara, his chest heaving, blood pouring from the new wounds. His gold eyes were wide with a stunned, profound awe. "By the goddess," he breathed, "a Luna's command." Ilara was shaking, staring at the dead wolf. You just saved my life, again." Kalen grabbed her arm. "In the tunnel, now." He all but threw her through the grate, dropping in after her. They landed in a foot of rushing, foul water.
Kalen pulled the grate shut, plunging them into near-total darkness. Above them, they heard more shouts as the rest of Xander's pack arrived. They were safe, for now. Ilara leaned against the slimy tunnel wall, her legs giving out. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. She had commanded one of Xander's enforcers. She had stopped him. Kalen slid down beside her, the adrenaline fading, even paler than before. The fight had cost him dearly. You knew I could do that?" she whispered, staring at her arm. The mark was still glowing, a soft silver beacon in the darkness. "I suspected," he panted, his voice weak. "The mark of the chosen. It's not a brand. It's a key. Xander didn't just reject a mate. He rejected a Luna gifted by the goddess herself. He's not just a fool. He's sacrilegious." He looked at her, his alpha authority momentarily eclipsed by his raw vulnerability. "The herbs, they're wearing off. The fight. I know." She tore a strip of cloth from her own shirt, dipping it in the grimy water to clean the new scratches on his chest. The proximity was overwhelming. In the dark, cramped tunnel, he was all she could smell, all she could feel. The scent of pine and his blood, the heat of his fever, the sheer dangerous power of him. He was an alpha, the embodiment of the power that had shattered her life. And yet she was touching him, tending to him, her fingers tracing the edges of his wounds. "Why are you still here?" he mumbled, his head lolling back against the brick. "You could have taken the money and run." You said he was a fool," she whispered. No one's ever taken my side." "I'm not taking your side, outcast," Kalen grunted, though his eyes were closed. "I'm stating a fact. He's a fool, and he's going to pay for what he did to me." "He's going to kill us," Ilara said, her voice flat. "We're in his territory. We'll never make it to the Iron Door." "We will." Kalen's hand fumbled for hers in the dark, his fingers lacing with hers. His skin was too hot, the fever raging. "You're my key, Ilara. Your mark. It blinds them. Xander wants to hide you, to possess you, because he fears you. He fears that." His thumb brushed the glowing mark. A jolt, sharp and electric, passed between them. It wasn't a mate bond. It was something else, something raw and ancient, a bond of Alpha and Luna, a bond of power. "As not the only one who fears it," she admitted, her voice small. "I don't," Kalen breathed. I need it." He was fading fast. "Ilara, I can't walk any further." He was right. He was shutting down. The silver was winning. She had to make a choice. The Iron Door was still a mile away. He would never make it. But her grandmother had told her stories, stories of the old ways. They were dangerous. They required a sacrifice. "Kalen," she said, her voice shaking but resolute, "you can't heal, but maybe I can. I can take the poison, a transfer." His eyes snapped open, suddenly lucid, alarmed. "No, absolutely not. It will kill you. A wolf of your status. You're not strong enough." "I'm stronger than you think," she said.
a flicker of the same authority she'd used on Rorik entering her voice. I survived Xander. I survived the rejection. I've survived 3 years alone. You said it yourself. I'm steel. Ilara, this is not a request. It's an order. You will not. You're not my alpha, she shot back, her voice echoing in the tunnel. The challenge hung in the air between them. He was an alpha, used to absolute obedience. She was an outcast, used to none. He stared at her, the golden amber of his eyes burning in the dark. A slow, painful smile touched his lips. No, he conceded. I'm not. Stay still, she commanded. This is going to hurt. She didn't know what she was doing. She was acting on pure, desperate instinct, guided by the whispers of her grandmother's magic. She placed her hands on his chest, on the wounds Rorik had left. Then she pressed her wrist, her glowing silver mark directly against the silver-laced wound in his side. The second her mark touched the silver-poisoned wound, agony ripped through her. It was not a simple pain. It was a cold, burning fire that raced up her arm and straight into her heart. She screamed, a raw, tearing sound that echoed in the tunnels. It felt like liquid nitrogen and acid being poured into her veins. She saw images, fragments of Kaelin's pain, the ambush, the glint of the blade, the sneer on the rogue's face. Kaelin roared, his own body arching off the tunnel floor as the connection seared them both. His alpha power surged, meeting her Luna energy, and for a second it felt like the world was ripping apart. But then something shifted. The silver fire in her veins didn't disappear, but it changed. It was no longer just a poison. It was fuel. Her mark, her Luna mark, began to throb with a pulse that matched her own. It was drinking the poison. It was taking the silver that was killing Kaelin and consuming it. Kaelin's body went lax. The raging fever that had been cooking him from the inside out vanished, flooding into her. She gasped, taking on his agony, his weakness. He watched, his eyes wide with disbelief, as the blackened, poisoned edges of his wounds began to close. The flesh knitted together, his wolf's healing suddenly released from its silver cage, kicking in with ferocious speed. Ilara, however, was dissolving. The strength drained from her limbs, her vision blurred, and the cold of the tunnel floor seeped into her bones. She collapsed against him, her body limp, her mark still pressed to his side, glowing like a miniature sun. Ilara! Kaelin's voice was sharp, terrified. He was healed, his strength flooding back, but she was now deathly cold. "It's cold," she whispered, her teeth chattering. She had taken the poison, but she had also taken the death that came with it. Her body, already weakened by hunger and fear, couldn't fight it. "No," Kaelin said, his voice a desperate growl. "You will not die, not for me, not like this." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his now healed, powerfully warm chest. He chafed her arms, her face, trying to bring warmth back. But she was fading. "It's all right," she mumbled, her eyes fluttering shut. "You're safe. Just get the money to—" "Damn the money!" he roared, the sound vibrating through her. "Damn Xander! Open your eyes!" He was an alpha. He was power. He commanded, and the world obeyed. But he couldn't command this. Or maybe he could. He pressed his lips to her forehead, a desperate, non-sexual act of pure power transfer. "You are under my protection, Ilara of the Moon," he vowed, his voice a low, primal rumble. "You are not permitted to leave.
I, Kalen, Alpha of Stonecrest, forbid it. He pushed his own life force, his alpha force, into her. It wasn't a mating bond. It was a claiming, an alpha claiming his Luna. Not a fated mate, but a chosen one. A bond of pack, of power, of shared sacrifice. It was just enough. The shivering slowed. A fragile, flickering warmth returned to her skin. Her eyes opened, no longer the dull brown of her human disguise, but a luminous, clear silver, the color of her mark. She stared up at him, her new eyes seeing him for the first time. Not just a shifter, not just an alpha, but a maelstrom of power, loyalty, and now a fierce, terrifying protectiveness. And her mark, her curse, was no longer just a brand on her skin. It was awake. She could feel it, a quiet, humming engine of power inside her. What did you do?" she whispered. "What you did," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He gently touched her cheek. "We saved each other." He stood, his body completely healed, his power thrumming in the close confines. He was no longer the dying man she dragged from the alley. He was an alpha king, in his prime. He lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. Where are we going?" she asked, her voice muffled against his leather jacket. "To the iron door," Kalen said, his golden eyes burning in the darkness. "But we're not running anymore. I'm not leaving this city until Xander knows exactly what he's lost." They reached the iron door, a heavy, unmarked steel entrance in a warehouse district by the river. Kalen didn't knock. He kicked it open. The shifter bar went silent. It was packed. Wolves, a few coyotes, even a bear shifter in the corner. All of them looked up, stunned. A grizzled old wolf with a scarred face, the owner, Silas, dropped a glass. "Kalen? By the moons, we heard you were dead." "The rumors were exaggerated," Kalen said, his voice booming in the suddenly quiet room. He was still carrying Alara, who hid her face against his chest, overwhelmed by the sheer number of shifters. "Who's?" Silas started, gesturing to Alara. "She is under my protection," Kalen announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She is Stonecrest." He strode to the bar and laid Alara gently on a bench. "Get her food, water, now." Silas nodded, immediately barking orders. "Kalen," a voice called. A man pushed through the crowd. He was younger than Kalen, his energy sharp and anxious. This was Jax, his beta. "Alpha, we've been tearing the city apart. Xander's men are everywhere. We thought—" "He ambushed me," Kalen said, his voice cold. "He used silver." Jax's eyes widened, then fell on Alara, who was nervously sipping the water Silas had given her. Jax's gaze turned suspicious. "And her? Is she one of his?" "She is the reason I'm alive," Kalen snapped. "She is the one who pulled the silver from my blood." Jax looked at Alara again, confused. "She's an outcast. I can smell it. She's packless. She looks human." "She is not what she seems," Kalen said, his voice low. "Where is Xander?" "He's here," Jax said, his voice dropping. "He's been here for an hour, telling everyone he's taking over the neutral zone, that you're dead and Stonecrest is headless." As if summoned, the doors to the bar burst open again. Alpha Xander strode in, flanked by two of his largest enforcers. He was the opposite of Kalen, sleek, dark, with a cruel beauty and eyes like chips of ice. He was laughing, talking to one of his men, until he saw Kalen standing at the bar, alive and at full strength. Xander's laughter died instantly. His eyes, cold and sharp, flicked from Kalen to the girl sitting on the bench. Ilara, he breathed. The name was a possessive, venomous caress. Ilara froze. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. All the old terror came rushing back, a cold tide that threatened to drown her. This was the man who had broken her. "What is this?" Xander snarled, his gaze fixing on Kalen. "My rejected trash, nursing my enemy back to health. I should have killed you when I had the chance, you weak-blooded bitch." The bar erupted in mutters. To insult a rejected was one thing, to be so open about it was another. Ilara flinched, curling in on herself. The power she'd felt in the tunnel vanished, replaced by the familiar, cringing fear. "You will not speak to her," Kalen said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. He moved, placing himself between Xander and Ilara. "She is mine," Xander hissed. "My fated mate, my rejection. Her life belongs to me. I let her live in that human filth as a kindness, but she has crossed a line." He pointed a finger at her. "Come here, Ilara." It was the voice he had used on her, the command, the one that had broken her will. She felt the pull, the ingrained obedience of a mate bond, even a shattered one. Her body trembled, wanting to obey. "No," she whispered. "What did you say?" Xander's eyes narrowed. "I said no." Xander laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "You think he can protect you? This weakened alpha. You think your little mark means anything?" He sneered at Kalen. "Did you see it, Stonecrest? The goddess's little joke? She marked her as a Luna after I cast her out. A queen with no throne, no pack, and no mate. It's a curse. It's nothing." "It's everything," Kalen replied, his voice a low growl. "And you were too stupid and too arrogant to see it. You didn't just reject your mate. You rejected your pack's destiny." "I am my pack's destiny," Xander roared. He lunged, shifting midair, his form exploding into that of a massive, jet-black wolf. He was aiming for Kalen. But Kalen was ready. He met Xander's shift with his own, a blur of motion as he transformed into a huge timber-gray alpha wolf. The two alphas crashed into each other, a whirlwind of claws and teeth that sent tables and shifters flying. The bar erupted into chaos. Xander's enforcers moved to join the fight, but Jax and Kalen's other pack members, who had been waiting with Jax, met them. Ilara scrambled back, her heart in her throat. Xander was bigger, faster, and he wasn't wounded. Kalen was healed, but he had just survived a silver poisoning. He was at a disadvantage. Xander got his teeth into Kalen's shoulder, throwing him against the bar. Kalen roared in pain. Xander lunged for his throat, going for the kill. "Stop him!" Ilara screamed at Jax. "I can't!" Jax yelled, busy with an enforcer. "It's an alpha challenge!" Ilara watched, helpless, as Xander, the man who had ruined her, prepared to kill the man who had saved her. "He's a fool," Kalen's voice echoed in her mind. "That is not a mark of rejection. That is the mark of a chosen Luna. I, Kalen, Alpha of Stonecrest, forbid it." The bond she had forged with Kalen in the tunnel, the Alpha Luna claim, throbbed. He was her Alpha, and she was his Luna. "No!" Ilara screamed again, but this time it was the voice from the alley. She stood up, her small form radiating a power that dwarfed everyone in the room. Her eyes were blazing silver, and the mark on her wrist was no longer hidden by makeup or shadow. It was a beacon, a blinding lunar silver fire that pulsed with the authority of the goddess herself. The wave of power that blasted from her was immense. It wasn't an attack. It was authority. Every shifter in the room, Stonecrest, Blackmoon, Neutral, froze. The Alphas, locked in combat, were ripped apart, thrown to opposite ends of the room as if by a giant hand. Xander, in his wolf form, whimpered. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. He was pinned to the floor by an invisible, ancient power. Elara walked forward, the chaotic bar parting for her like the sea. She was no longer the terrified girl from the slum. She was robed in silver light, her gaze imperious. She stopped, standing over the cowering black wolf. Xander looked up at her, his icy eyes wide with terror. He was finally seeing her, not the weak Omega, not the rejected mate, but the thing he had been terrified of all along. She looked at him, and for the first time she felt no fear, only a cold, vast pity. "You are broken," she said, her voice layered with the power of the mark. "You fear power in others because you have none of your own. You didn't reject me because I was weak. You rejected me because you knew I was strong." She placed her hand, the one with the glowing mark, on the top of Xander's head. "I, Elara, the Moon Chosen, sever the final tie," she declared. "Your claim on me is ash. Your power over me is gone." She pushed. Xander screamed, a sound that was half wolf, half man. The last, festering remnant of their fated bond didn't just break, it incinerated. He was free of her, and she, finally, was free of him. She turned her back on him. Kalen, now in his human form, was watching her, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated awe. She walked to him, the silver light surrounding her beginning to fade as her control asserted herself. She was exhausted, her legs shaking, but she refused to fall. Kalen caught her as she stumbled. "Alpha Xander!" Kalen called out, his voice ringing with victory. "You attacked my pack, you poisoned me, and you abused a chosen of the goddess." He looked around the room. "He is banished from this territory. If he is ever seen here again, it is a declaration of war. Am I understood?" Zayas, the bar owner, nodded slowly. "Understood, Alpha Kalen." Xander, his power broken, shifted back to his human form. He was trembling, humiliated. He stared at Elara with a toxic mix of hatred and terror. He grabbed his remaining enforcer and stumbled out of the bar, defeated. Silence reigned. Then, Jax, Kalen's beta, walked forward. He stopped in front of Elara. He looked at Kalen, who nodded. Jax dropped to one knee. "Luna," he said, his voice thick with reverence. One by one, the other Stonecrest pack members in the room knelt. Then Zayas, then the other shifters. They weren't just bowing to Kalen's victory. They were bowing to her. Elara looked at the kneeling shifters, her heart hammering. Kalen's hand was warm and steady on her back. "Come," Kalen said, his voice soft, for her alone. "Let's go home." The Stonecrest territory was nothing like the cramped, dying city. It was a vast expanse of pine-covered mountains and clear, rushing rivers. The pack house, a sprawling, beautiful compound of stone and timber nestled in a high valley.
The pack received her with a mixture of shock, confusion, and reverence. The story of the confrontation at the Iron Door had traveled faster than they had. They saw their alpha, healed and whole, and they saw the small, quiet woman at his side. They saw the glowing silver mark on her wrist, and they felt the shift in the air. Their pack, leaderless in its Luna, was suddenly whole. The pack bond settled over them, a quiet, comforting weight, and she felt it. 1,000 threads, all connecting to her, offering loyalty, strength, and family. Kalen didn't push her. He gave her a suite of rooms adjoining his own, with a balcony that overlooked the entire valley. They were filled with soft fabrics, warm fires, and, she noted with a small, watery smile, a pantry stocked with food. For the first day, she just slept. She slept for 20 hours, the deep, healing sleep of someone who hadn't been safe in years. When she woke, she found clean clothes laid out for her, and a tray of food by her bed. Kalen was nowhere to be seen, but she could feel him, a steady, warm presence at the edge of her senses, the other half of the Alpha-Luna bond they now shared. On the second evening, she found him on the main balcony, overlooking the valley as the twin moons began to rise. He heard her approach, but he didn't turn. "It's different from the city," he said, his voice quiet. I'd forgotten what clean air smelled like," she admitted, coming to stand beside him, a few feet of respectful distance between them. They stood in silence for a long time, watching the moon shadows stretch across the pines. "They're afraid of me," Ilara said softly. "No," Kalen corrected, finally turning to look at her. "They are in awe of you. They've been without a Luna for a long time. They expected me to choose one through politics or challenge. They did not expect me to bring home one chosen by the goddess herself. I don't know how to be that," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "I just know how to hide, how to survive." "You don't need to hide anymore, Ilara." She looked at her wrist. The mark was no longer blazing, but it wasn't dormant. It glowed with a soft, silver light, as calm and constant as the moons above. She had spent so long caking it in cheap, waterproof concealer, seeing it as a brand of her failure. "You knew," she said, "in the apartment. You knew what it was." "I knew what the legends said," Kalen clarified, "that a fated bond, broken by an unworthy alpha, would sometimes result in the goddess claiming the Luna for herself. It was a failsafe, a way to protect the power she had gifted. I never thought I would live to see it." "Xander thought it was a curse," she said, the name no longer holding any pain. "It was a curse for him," Kalen said, a dark satisfaction in his voice. "By rejecting you, he rejected the goddess's gift. His pack will stagnate. They will never know the balance of a true Alpha-Luna pair. He destroyed his own future." Ilara finally absorbed the truth of it. All those years of starvation, of fear, of shame, it was all based on the lie of a terrified, arrogant male. "We aren't fated mates, Kalen," she said, stating the fact that hung between them. "No," he agreed. His voice was steady. "We are not. Your fated bond was broken. My fated mate died many years ago." Ilara's head snapped up. She saw the old, banked pain in his eyes, and her heart ached for him. I'm sorry." "Do not be," he said. "Fate is a path given to us, but destiny is what we choose." He took a step closer, his pine and ozone scent washing over her. He was so large, so powerful, and she felt no fear at all. "You are not my fated mate, Ilara," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rumble. "But you are my Luna. You saved my life. You healed my pack bond. You are the other half of my alpha.
Fate did not give you to me. You chose to bind yourself to me in that tunnel. I will honor that choice above all else." He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The bond between them, the claim, was more profound than a simple touch. It was respect. It was sacrifice. It was partnership. Ilara looked out at the vast, wild territory that was now her home. She was no longer Ilara the rejected. She wasn't the human-scented outcast in the third-floor slum. She lifted her hand, palm up, and watched the soft, silver glow of her mark pulse in time with her heart. It was not a brand of shame. It was a beacon. "You saved me, Kalen," she whispered. He finally closed the distance between them, his hand gently covering hers, his warmth seeping into her skin. His golden eyes met her new silver ones. "No, Ilara," he murmured, his thumb brushing her glowing mark. "We saved each other."